Jai Prabhuji. Welcome to the class today when we're going to talk about Brahman. But before we start, I would like to share a confession. I found it challenging and very difficult to talk about Brahman because Brahman is not a concept to rationalize or to explain. Brahman is to experience in a direct experience. And what does it all mean to us? We started this course of Advaita Vedanta when we learn that Advaita Vedanta recognizes that underneath this universe of names and forms lies a single reality that is called Brahman. So we already learned that Brahman is the ultimate reality, or the reality that we should direct ourselves to. The challenging part of speaking about Brahman is, first of all, it is not my direct experience at the moment. And when we read that Brahman is to experience and Brahman is not to talk about, there is some misconception that sometimes we consider Brahman as something to achieve or something that I will experience. And even to say something about Brahman, as we understand up until now, is wrong. It's irrelevant. But it's not like when we talk about the mind, for example. If we talk about the mind and the obstacles, or we talk about how I feel that I'm the center of the world and everything is happening to me, we can relate. I'm sure you can understand me and I can understand you. If I tell you about my struggles, you will be able to identify and understand because you have your own. So there are certain subjects that we're talking that creates between us more understanding and I would say even more identification. But when I knew that I needed to talk about Brahman, I knew that it will be far from my experience and yet very important, because it's not that we say, oh, if it's indescribable and we cannot grasp or comprehend it, let's leave it aside and not talk about it. No, the truth is that the scriptures describes what Brahman is in order also to give us the idea and the direction. So from this difficulty still came this class, and I hope that we will be able to get something out of it. Now, when we come to have a class like today to talk about Brahman, we are trying to understand what it is. Now, when we say that Brahman is to experience, it's not enough only to experience, it should be in a direct experience. So when I sit here in front of you and you sit in front of me, there are many things that stand between us. It's not only that we see each other. Each one of us sits here with his own mental luggage, with his own perceptions, with his own ideas. We have the senses that of hearing and seeing each other. We have what we feel. We think that we sit in the same room and experience the same reality. But what happens here is that each one of us sits with himself and translate everything that is happening here according to his perception. Now, we know that the mind is limited. We also know that the senses are limited. And when we come to talk about Brahman, which is the unlimited, how can we actually grasp it, or how can we even try to rationalize it or give it a certain definition? So it's very important for us to understand that Brahman is beyond any thought, perception, or speech. Let's also not forget that when we comprehend something, it is through the instrument of the mind, so it has to be limited. The mind is limited, our senses are limited, our thoughts, our feelings, they are all part of such illusory condition that we live in, that is covering our Brahmanic nature. They are covering the true self. So also when we talk about some subject and we create a concept about it, we turn it also into something or a thing. And Brahman is not something and is not a thing that we can say. So I'm trying to express the difficulty in talking about Brahman. That's on one hand. On the other hand, we have the scriptures that direct us to meditate on Brahman, to realize our Brahmanic nature. So we can ask, what can we say about Brahman? So we know that Brahman is pure existence, pure bliss, pure consciousness. Brahman is shapeless, genderless, and bodiless. Brahman is also neither matter or energy, since also matter and energy exist only within the limits of time and space, and Brahman cannot be limited. He cannot be part of time and space. It is beyond it. It's transcendental. So it can only be considered as a pure consciousness. Brahman is also neither dependent or relative to anyone or anything. And basically, it's indescribable. How can we describe the absolute truth? So we can ask ourselves, what do we do here? We can say that we share an intellectual appreciation, and also to take the scriptures' direction, the great sages, and to direct ourselves to reality or to pure consciousness, that even though for us now it's words, it's concepts, we still have the direction. One mistake that happened to the spiritual seeker on the path is that we think that I, here as an Indra, will experience the Brahman or will experience reality. And this concept is illusory, first of all, because there is no duality in the experience. Once we experience our Brahmanic nature, this duality of I and you dissolve, it disappear. And there is only Brahman, there is only consciousness. So this concept that I will sit and meditate and something will happen to me. And not to talk about the fact that many times we imagine it as something, each one has his own ideas about it. It's wrong, because there will not be this someone when reality happens, or when this direct experience happens. There will not be me, Indra, as a someone, as a separate entity that I think that I am at the moment. So let's read from Prabhuji's book and continue from there. The Advaita Vedanta states that Brahman is the only reality, Brahma Satyam, and that the world has a temporary existence, Jagan Mithya. Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya Jivo Brahmeva Naparaha. Brahman is real, the universe is false. The Jiva is Brahman itself. It is not different from Brahman. So we see here in these two verses the importance of the understanding that Brahman is real. Anything that we experience in this universe, anything that we experience while we are locked in this concept of illusion of this body and mind, is false. We will not get now to the subject of reality and what is reality. Do we experience reality? Are there any difference between my reality and yours? There is a whole chapter that Prabhuji dedicated to the subject of reality, and we will learn it in the future. Now it's important for us to understand from this that we understand that the Jiva, the soul, is not different from Brahman. So in each one of us, there is the true self, the true reality, the consciousness that at the moment is covered by illusion, and is covered in a way that I think that I exist as the center of the world, I exist as the owner of my actions, I exist as an egoic, and not only egoic, but separate entity than you. Obviously, if I can't experience the consciousness within me, the true self within me, I will not be able to recognize it in you. Up until now, we understood that Brahman is indescribable, Brahman is independent, Brahman is not touched, or Brahman is unchangeable, we should say. Brahman is unchangeable and cannot be affected by illusion. And according to the sages of the Upanishads, Brahman has two aspects, Saguna and Nirguna. So let's read carefully. Saguna, or Apara Brahman, is Brahman conditioned by the Upadis of Maya, or limiting agents of illusion. Nirguna is Brahman devoid of any quality or attribute, and is also called Para-Brahman, or Supreme Brahman. Now, the Katha Upanishads describes both aspects of Brahman. And I continue to read, no worries, we will go over it and understand each one. Just as fire is one, but upon entering the world, it assumes different shapes depending on the objects it consumes, does also the non-dual self, which dwells in all beings, assumes the shape of every creature it enters. Another quote, Just as air is one but assumes different shapes when it enters different objects, the non-dual self takes the shape of every creature it enters. From these two verses, we understand that there are two aspects to Brahman: the Nirguna Brahman, which is devoid of any quality, and Saguna Brahman with qualities. What it's important for us to take from these verses is that Brahman has the ability to assume the shape of every creature that he enters or any object. So if we look at the example of the water that is inside a cup or a bottle takes the shape of the object, right? But the water is the same if we put it in a pot, if we put it in a cup, or if we put it in a bottle. The same water with different shapes. And this verse emphasizes for us that the true self takes the shape of every creature it enters. We can learn from it that Brahman assumes the shape of the body and the mind. It's not that in real Brahman becomes it. No, Brahman assumes it as if it takes the shape of the creature it enters. We can see from here the ability of the true self of Brahman to assume the shape of different objects. And this is why we know that inside of each one of us the true self exists, or the true self lies. It just covered now, and we need to unveil it. But once we unveil it, we can see that the true self was never affected by this illusion. Now, in the Upanishads, we also find descriptions for both the transcendent and immanent aspects of Brahman. We understand that Brahman has the transcendental aspect and the immanent one. And is it easier for us to accept or to say that there is transcendent aspect? I mean, if you turn to religious people, they will tell you that they believe that there is a God as a creator, and the creator of this universe, the creator of the human beings, and they deeply believe that there is God. They don't question their belief, they accept it, and this is what they follow. But if you go to most human beings that do not believe in God as a creator and there is someone that created us, they can tell you that they do believe that there is something sublime or something that is supreme, something that is bigger than us, even if they don't know to say what it is or to describe it. But they can definitely say that they know that there is something transcendental to human beings. So we can see that even the religious person, it's clear. It's his belief, that's what he believes in. But also if someone doesn't believe, many gets to the conclusion that there is something higher, that there is something supreme. This is when we talk about the transcendent aspect of Brahman. But what about the immanent aspect? At times, when discussing with people and talking and having different conversation, I came to the understanding that the immanent aspect is more difficult to understand or to accept. one of the reasons is that we know that if I want to create something, I want to create a table. So there is me separated from the table. Not only that, I need certain material that is not me, that it's outside of me, to go take it and build and bring together the table. So the distinction that there is me and there is the thing that I want to create, which is different than me, is not in the shape of me, is different material, etc. But with Brahman is not the same process. And let's get to the subject of the Upadis of Maya that we mentioned in the beginning. Brahman assumes the Upadis of Maya and manifests as the universe and its creator. Let's read it again. Brahman assumes the Upadis of Maya and manifests as the universe and its creator. So what is this Upadis, or the limiting agent of illusion? Upadi, on one hand, is the condition of body and mind obscuring the true self. Again, we see here the point that when Brahman is hidden, when Brahman lies as our true nature, but we identified with our mind and body, then Brahman is obscured, is not revealed, is hidden. But Upadi can also be viewed as a disguise or a vehicle for true reality. Now, both we can say defining and limiting in it, because we are saying it's a disguise, it's a vehicle, but all these are also in the frame of limitation of trying to explain and understand what is Brahman. So for example, we can take the body of a man or an animal and we can say that the body of a man or an animal is the upadi of its true self. Another example is that the true self, Brahman, is hidden in a living being, the jiva, by the upadi of the mind. So Brahman lives in the living being as the jiva by the upadi of the mind, by the obscuring of the mind, by the veil of the mind. So it's very important to understand that it's not that the Brahman is falling into illusion. We said that Brahman is the ultimate reality, is pure consciousness. It is unchangeable. It doesn't take the illusion and being affected by it. So here we can see that by the upadi, by the obscuring element, there is this illusory covering. So in order to enter the living beings, Brahman needed a certain, in simple words, we can try to say a certain vehicle, a certain mean that will allow it to enter the living creatures. Now, in its immanent aspect, Brahman not only resides in the universe, but also becomes it. But Prabhuji says, however, despite becoming the universe, Brahman does not completely transform into it, because its essential nature remains transcendent. And this is what we need to take and remember. When Brahman takes the Upadis of Maya and enter this world and enter the living beings, Brahman becomes the universe, it pervades everything, everything depends on Brahman. Brahman does not completely transform into it. So the essential nature of Brahman remains transcendent. And again, as we said before, it is covered at the moment, but it's not that Brahman becomes it. In the Shvetashvatara Upanishads, we can find a description how Brahman permeates the universe and how it permeates everything. And we can see from here that Brahman existed in the beginning and then created the universe out of itself. Brahman didn't need any other principle or material in order to create the new universe. We're talking here about the immanent aspect of Brahman, so it relates to the fact that Brahman created the universe out of itself. And the example that we can take here is that when we see the web of the spider, the web came from the spider body. It's not that the spider needed to go and take some other material in order to create the web. Or when we look at fire, we can see that there are sparks coming out of the fire, but it's out of the fire. It's not that the fire is one thing and the sparks are different. So also here, in the example of Brahman created the universe out of itself, is the essence of everything dependent on it, and there was no need for other principle in order for Brahman to create the world. And that's why it's so important, because if we are saying that Brahman is the ultimate truth, the absolute consciousness, if Brahman needed something else in order to create, then it would limit Brahman. Brahman will not be the essence of everything. In order to be the essence of everything, it needs to be the first and initial principle. And that's what the scriptures tell us, that Brahman existed in the beginning. So there was Brahman, and then creation came. We will end the Saguna Brahman part with reading the verse that will summarize it all for us. Sarvam kalvidam Brahma, tad jalam iti santa upasita. Brahman is the origin, the end, and the maintenance of all this universe. One should therefore quietly meditate on Brahman. And I chose to end the Saguna part here because it really summarizes everything that we were trying or made some effort in order to understand and give the right appreciation to the scriptures. It says here that Brahman is the origin, the end, and maintenance of everything. And we should meditate on Brahman. And this is the direction that we need to take from here. It's not that we should try maybe to go to all this mental speculation and mental concept, because we understand that it's irrelevant when we talk about Brahman. But we should meditate on Brahman. Meditate and go deep in until Brahman, until the truth self will allow or will give us himself. When the true self chooses one, then it gives it the revelation. It gives you the opportunity to realize that there is one reality, one consciousness that is above anything that we are familiar with and beyond the mind. Let's talk now about the Nirguna Brahman, the other aspect of Brahman. So in Sanskrit, guna translates as quality, nir as without. So from here we can see that to say Nirguna Brahman is Brahman that is devoid of all qualities. So it's indescribable with language. It cannot be described with words. And here it's important to understand, because many times people say, oh, I can't explain it. It's not explainable. But the reason that is not explainable, it's because it precedes any verbal or any verbal definition. So if we are saying that Brahman is the origin, then it precedes everything, and it also precedes verbal definitions. So we can't say what is Brahman. We can use the method of Neti Neti, which the Advaita Vedanta uses, which mean not this, not that. So it's a negation of any empirical attributes, any definition, and any relationship. So it's a negation because we cannot say what is, we say what it is not. And it also opens our understanding and comprehension to understand that what is, by saying what is not, we can understand the limitation of the mind while trying to define or to limit it. When we look at the relative world, we can see that it's made out of opposites: cold and heat, day and night, pleasure, pain, joy, suffering, etc. The pair of opposites gives us the ability to experience and to many times appreciate certain experiences because we know their opposites. We can definitely experience joy because we experienced suffering, or we can experience cold because we experienced heat. But what's interesting here is that Prabhuji gives the light room example. And it says that it's if someone from the moment he was born would be put in a light room, he will not have this division, right, between dark and light. Not only that he will not know what light it is, he will also not know what darkness is. So the pairs of opposites definitely gives us the ability to experience different experiences and to know them because they know their opposites. But all these experiences are limited. Now, when we speak about Brahman and we said it is the infinite, even then the mind can relate to infinite as infinite because it knows what finite is. So also here we can see how definitions create limitation. it is very difficult to understand that there is something, even to say something, it's a problem in order to refer it to Brahman. And this is why I hope that you can feel the difficulty in talking about Brahman. So we can use the Neti Neti method and to negate the characteristics of Brahman, but not Brahman itself. We cannot negate Brahman. If someone will be sensitive enough and open also, we can definitely recognize that there is something inside of each one of us that is infinite, or that was there from the moment we remember ourselves. And I'm not talking about the experiences of life when I was 4, when I was 10, and then 16, etc. In all these experiences, if we go back even from age 3, 4 and on, we can recognize that there was something in us that never changed. Yeah, situation changed, people changed, the locations changed, but something in us is permanent, goes with us always, and this we cannot take out. And also we cannot say that it doesn't exist. And here comes the importance of understanding that there is something permanent within each living entity, and that this illusion that we live our life according to is temporal. It's not real. It, like, as much as we came and was born into this world, one day we will disappear. But the Brahmanic nature stays. And when the scriptures direct us, meditate on Brahman, meditate on your true self, even though our standpoint is egoic and limited, at least we know the direction. At least we have a guidance. And when you meet a real guru or a real spiritual master, he will be able to direct you to this direction. A guru is someone who he experienced his true nature. He already went beyond the mind. And when he is situated in the self, it's something that arises in you, in us, the experience of our true self. So this whole relationship with the spiritual master has one main direction, that you will experience your true nature. Yeah, it's not enough to sit in front of the master. It's not enough to only live with the master. It's important to be in a certain fusion, in a certain vibration, that you will be open, we will be open to the experience and be able to shed this veil of illusion and to let go of the mind and realize the true self. We will end here. Next class we will continue with Brahman, and we will talk about how Brahman is Satchid Ananda. And it's interesting maybe to see that with all the difficulty of talking about Brahman, trying to explain what is and what Brahman is not, we eventually sit here for some time and still talk and still bring in, or I would say maybe stretch the mind capabilities in order to tune in to the right direction. Thank you very much for joining me today. I will see you next time. Jai Prabhuji.